So fats have been given a bad rep in the world, and but they are healthy fats and oils which are good for us. And as we read here, a moderate amount of healthy fats from natural plant sources can nourish the body, support the brain and heart, and contribute to overall wellness when included as a part of a simple, balanced diet. So fat is not all bad. There are fats which are good for us, as we shall see. All right. Now, when it comes to why we eat, why we're hungry, it's not just to fill a space, but it really is because the body needs something. And the body needs micronutrients, macronutrients, and also fiber. These are really the main reasons why we eat. But today we're going to consider macronutrients. When you hear the term macronutrients, generally we've broken them down into three in the realms of nutrition. And there they are on your screen: carbs, protein, and fat. All right. So when it comes to proteins, basically put the building blocks of our bodies. Really, they're amino acids that our bodies use to build the protein that make up our hair, skin, muscles, sinews that make us as we grow. All right. Another thing is the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is our energy source or primary energy source in many different forms. And what we don't use is also stored as fats. And then we're talking about fats. Fats as a thing that we consume is very necessary. Fat is actually the most dense energy source when we eat. All right. So if you eat a lot of fats, you'll have a lot of energy, but we're not purporting that here. What we're purporting is eating the right amount of fats and the right kind of fat. In that little picture that you see there, you can see an avocado, for example. An avocado has natural phytonutrient fat in it. All right. So what are fats and oils anyway? All right. Plants store energy as fat in the seeds. All right. And the fats pack more than double the calories. So fats pack more than double the calories per gram when compared to storing it as carbohydrates. So it's a very smart thing that plants do to actually store their energy as fat in the seeds. All right. And I hope this is bringing to your mind why you see canola seed oil, all these seed oils, all right? This great explosion of all these different seed oils. Why seed? It's because that's where they can actually get the oil from. The plants store the oil in the seed. And that is why you have nuts having a lot of the fat, all right? Your almonds, your cashews, and so on, they have the fat stored in them, all right? It's a very wise thing that the plant does to store fat in the seeds. But these fats are then stored as triglycerides in specialized organelles called oil bodies. When the seeds finally germinate in the soil, it converts these fat stores into glucose and energy needed to grow its first leaves. All right. So I want to then contrast this with animal fat. It's kind of similar because whatever energy the animal doesn't use, either by overconsumption or under exertion or the consumption directly of fat, there is a surplus of energy. The animal then stores that as fat as well, by a process called de novo lipogenesis. All right. So too much carbs, you're not burning that carbs, the animal isn't burning it, then it's stored as what? Fat. And that fat is then stored in the eater, whomever eats it as well, if they're not using it. All right. So that's what fats really are. So you've always heard the term saturated and unsaturated. But first, what is it saturated with? I want to tell you that it's saturated with hydrogen. Does that make sense? So the carbon bonds in saturated fats, it doesn't have a double bond chemically. Don't let this worry you too much. And so hydrogen can then enter and actually saturate it. All right. And when it's saturated, it becomes straight and it allows it to be packed tight together. These are typically found in animal products like butter, cheese, fatty meat. All right. These are known to increase bad cholesterol levels which can then raise the risk of heart disease. So we're going to talk about bad and good cholesterol in a while, but we want to talk about saturated and unsaturated fat. So what you want to be looking for is unsaturated fats. And let's go on to that. These are bent molecular structures. They have a double carbon in their, I'm doing my best to remember it, but they have a double carbon in their chemical setup, and with so doing, it cannot be saturated that easily with hydrogen, and so it remains liquid at room temperature. These are generally extracted from plants and fish, such as avocados, nuts, salmon. They are considered heart healthy because they can help improve blood cholesterol by maintaining good, lowering the bad cholesterol levels. Make sense? So what you want to be looking for is not the fat which turns hard or solid at room temperature, but that which remains liquid and comes from plants. All right? I hope that's making some sense so far. I'm unable to see the chat, but I know I have a co-host who will help me out in a while. All right? So let's go on to the mystery of coconut oil. When putting this together, I say, but I must touch coconut oil because coconut oil is classed as a saturated fat because it is solid at room temperature. All right. If you go into the supermarket and you see the coconut, which is genuine coconut oil there, it generally seeps. All right. But coconut oil is special. And in a way, some science has presented coconut oil as a bad thing for you to have. All right. So how do we look at that? All right. Let's look at that. Read with me here. It talks about coconut oil has a unique medium chain triglyceride setup, and this sets it apart from the long chain fatty acids found in animal products that are readily stored as body fat. And because of this MCT content, the body can now use the fat from coconut oil as energy readily because of the medium chain triglyceride setup. Another thing about it is that it has something called lauric acid, and it's a very rare and vital nutrient. Now, this right here is actually a long chain triglyceride. But what this does is that it doesn't act the same in the body. What it actually does is actually heals the body. As we read here, it's a key component of human breast milk where it serves to protect infants from infections and possesses potent antimicrobial, antiviral, and antifungal properties. So I bring this up to say that sometimes we have to split hairs and be very specific. Sometimes the more you learn is the less you really think you know. But if you approach things in a very generalized sense and clumpy sense, you just clump everything together, you may think that everything acts the same in the body. Sometimes it's even done with plant, for example, plant estrogen. Someone say, oh, estrogen is not good for you. Too much estrogen. Oh, plants have estrogen. Therefore, it's not good for you. But in careful looking at the subject, what you realize is that plant estrogen acts quite differently in the body from animal estrogen, for example. So even the same is with coconut oil. It may be considered a saturated oil or saturated fat, but really you have to look at it more than that. How does it act in the body? How does it carry on? And what are its constituents? All right? So it acts quite differently. And I encourage you to read up on that science as well. All right? So that's a little bit on saturated and unsaturated fats. Remember, what you want is unsaturated fat that remains liquid at room temperature. So let's talk about cholesterol now. Cholesterol is a waxy fat-like substance that is vital for your survival. It is absolutely necessary for building and maintaining cell membranes, producing essential steroid hormones like estrogen and testosterone, synthesizing vitamin D, and creating bile acids required to digest dietary fat. All right. So without cholesterol, you can't survive. All right. So sometimes we talk about cholesterol. Once again, we have something that we Oh, cholesterol. No, but there, cholesterol, before we talk about what's good or bad, is needed in the body. If your cholesterol levels are too low, um, together less than 200, then that can be a problem in the vital operations of your body. Your cholesterol levels show how much cholesterol is circulating in your blood. Your HDL, or what we call high density lipoprotein, which is also classed as good cholesterol, is the number you want to be high, ideally 60 to 80. And your low density lipoprotein, what is classed as bad cholesterol, should be below 100. And if that person is a heart patient, even below 70. But you want to work that out with your primary care or your healthcare provider, okay? So your total should be below 200. So next time you go to the doctor, you're doing your health panel or just having a blood test done, check your cholesterol, take a look at it and find out what's going on. If you already know, now you know what yardstick to measure it against. So let's talk about good and bad cholesterol. So we talked about low density lipoprotein, that this is the cholesterol which we would say is bad, okay? And why is it bad? I would say because of what it does in the body. Here's what it does. It carries fat, or what we call cholesterol, to your organs. It's circulating. All right, so let's read. It transports cholesterol, a waxy substance necessary for building cells and making hormones, through your bloodstream to your tissues. So that's what it does. It's carrying cholesterol to the tissues. And it's often called bad cholesterol. Now, excess of it slips into arterial walls and forms thick, hard plaque-like substance, which restricts blood flow and increases your risk of heart attack and stroke, also called atherosclerosis. All right. So that's what it does. It's circulating cholesterol, trying to get to your organs. But if the levels go too high, then they end up where they're not supposed to go, which is in the artery walls, which we'll talk about just now. But let's talk about HDL, which is good cholesterol. So HDL, good. High is good. High density lipoprotein, that's the good one. This is the good cholesterol. And what does it do? It carries excess cholesterol away from your arteries and back to the liver to be flushed out. So to the liver to be packaged in fat and sent out through the back door into the toilet. So this is what high density lipoprotein does and why it is said to be good cholesterol, because of what it does in the body. Are you seeing this picture here to your right? I want you to consider the one at the bottom first, which is a normal artery. All right. So your blood, your arterial lumen should be clear and unoccluded. All right. Just like this. So blood can flow and your heart doesn't have to put that pressure to force it, and your blood pressure against your artery walls go up because the road is clear. All right. You got out early to go to work one day. The road is just clear. You're like, wow. Well, that's how your blood cells feel like, your red blood cells feel like when they have nothing in the way. But over time, when you have too much cholesterol circulating in the bloodstream, they tend to go where they shouldn't go. And they end up here, as you can see, not directly in the lumen, but within what we call the tunica intima. So like picture a hose and you cut the hose and you're looking down in it. Well, your arteries are kind of like that, but um, way more complicated. There are three layers. All right, the tunica adventitia, which is the outer layer, tunica media, which is the medium layer, but then the inner layer is a layer called tunica intima, which is made up of endothelial tissue. Now, here is some news that you must know. Recent research has linked inflammation to the buildup of plaque within that layer more than just cholesterol circulating in your blood. Does that make sense? So we want to view the system as a whole. It's like a perfect storm. It's like ingredients setting up to create a storm. One of the ingredients is that there's too much circulating cholesterol, too much LDL. And so that LDL goes somewhere. But however, it is really inflammation in the body that stresses the tunica intima, that inner part of the blood vessel, that inner part, and causes those endothelial cells to not be so tightly packed. And so fat can now enter. It enters, as you're seeing here, builds up, and then ruptures, and that fat globule is in the bloodstream, just waiting to go to a small road that it cannot pass and clog that hole, clog that blood vessel that supplies different organs in the body. It may be the brain, and that results in a stroke. All right, it can be in a coronary heart blood vessel, and that results in a heart attack. It could even go to the pulmonary vessels that support the lungs and result in what we call a pulmonary embolism. You can also call it a lung attack. All right. And these are all immediate and life-threatening disease events. So it is very important to make sure that what you're eating is supplying your health, that it's not honoring the tongue and disrespecting the body, but that you're putting your health first. You're finding, how can I get my food tasty but healthy at the same time? All right, because eating good food is also an enjoyable thing. So I encourage you to look upon that as well, that inflammation in the body is actually the primary driver of atherosclerosis more than circulating cholesterol actually is. All right. Let's move on. I want to now bring to you some biblical foundation where fat is concerned. In Leviticus 3:17, it says, the fat, speaking of the fat, it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood. Did you know that in the Israelite economy, it was a sinful thing to eat fat? Oh yeah. You see, God gave this group of people, a nomadic people, not greater than anybody else, not better than anybody else, but he said, hey, I'm going to take you. I love when I take something which is nothing and make it something. And I'm going to give to you my ordinances. I'm going to give to you my ways, my oracles, not that you will be better than other nations, but so that you will teach other nations about my ways. I want you to shine, and they should say, how come they're healthy? What are they doing? Now, let me ask you something. If you know that God is God and God has given a certain set of people the best, wouldn't you want to learn it? Of course. All right. If you got around a man who had many children that he had adopted, but he has some which are his, and he took them aside and said, hey, I'm going to teach you something, which I'm only going to tell you, but I want you to tell the others. Wouldn't you want to learn it and say, I wonder what he's telling his children now? You would want to learn it. And so here we're seeing that the eating of fat is something which was strictly prohibited from the Bible. Leviticus 7:23, for example, says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox, of sheep, or of goat. So animal fat consumption is strictly prohibited. Genesis 4:4, for example, when Abel brought the sheep and Cain just brought fruits, the Bible says he also, speaking of Abel, he brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But we know that he didn't respect Cain's because that's not what he asked for. It is the burning of fat that signals the burning of sin. All right. So God really wants to get rid of sin. And in the biblical narrative, the Bible presents fat as a symbol, animal fat in the sanctuary as a symbol of sin. Isn't that amazing? I can tell you that through my time when I was younger and coming up and having seen many things, I've seen fat being cooked, and sometimes when it's fried up and it's put to the side and you take that fat, you know what you're doing to yourself. But no knowledge has come, so we ought to not do that anymore, not sin against the body that way. I want to give you another story, and the story comes from 1 Samuel 2:12-17. It says, now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial, Now, if you look that up in the Bible, you don't want to do anything that sons of Belial do. You don't want to be associated with them in any way. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servants came. Now, these priests weren't good priests. They were Eli's son, and they were sons of Belial. And guess what their servants did? While the flesh was in the seething with the flesh hook of the 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it in the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, all that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites came thither, also before they burnt the fat. The priest's servants came and said to the man that sacrificed, give the flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, no, 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 let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as your soul desire, then he would answer him, no, but thou shalt give it to me now. And if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for the men abhorred the offering of the Lord. So these men didn't even wait until they burnt the fat, which signaled the burning of sin for that sacrifice. In those days, they used to sacrifice, right? These men presented a bad man thing and said, don't tell me say you go burn no fat. I want it right now, right just up. Give it to me. No, don't burn no fat. I want the fat with it on it. And they took it and they would eat it. All right. And we knew what happened to these young men and their father as well, who suffered and continued them in their office when he should have just put them out. All right. So what we've seen from the Bible is that the eating of fat is nothing good for the body, but also in a symbolic way, it represents the burning of sin. It's the fat that actually creates a sweet savor that goes up to the Lord, which represents that sin is being consumed away. All right, so now that we've done that, that's a mouthful a bit. But let's go now to some more principles from the book, and then we'll come back to some other things. There is a danger that in presenting the principles of health reform, some will be in favor of bringing in changes that would be for the worse instead of for the better. Health reform must not be urged in a radical manner. So what we're teaching you this evening, some of you know it already, some of you for the first time, but it may sound radical to you, but you can get even more radical than this, all right? The Lord meets us where we are, but he does not expect us to stay there. As the situation now is, we cannot say that, for example, milk and eggs and butter should be entirely discarded. I think this was in 1902 that this was written. We must be careful to make no innovations because under the influence of extreme teachings, there are conscientious souls who will surely go to extremes. Their physical appearance will injure the cause of health reform, for few know how to properly supply the place of that which they discard. And it's that last sentence that I want you to focus on. As we talk about new start, remember the N stands for nutrition. Sometimes we skip the part that we want to supply nutrition and talk about which sources we shouldn't take nutrition from. But before we get to what sources are better and what sources carry disease, we first want to make sure that we're nourishing the body. All right. Man cannot subsist on air. All right. And sometimes in adopting health reform, we take out something and we're not avid enough to learn. We don't have that interest enough to learn. How can I supply and replace what I've just removed? Make sense? So that's what I want you to consider this evening. Okay, I'm going to be taking out some things out of my diet, but I want to learn what are the plant-based alternatives. All right? What can I put in if I take this out? All right, if I'm going to supply my body with amino acids from plant sources and not from animal sources, where can I get it? You see? Whoa, people say, where do you get your protein? By the way, next week's presentation is called protein. We're having a special presenter for that one. Proteins. Where do you get your protein? Don't miss it. All right. So we want to make sure that we're replacing what we are discarding with healthful sources. All right. Some in abstaining from milk and eggs and butter have failed to supply the system with proper nourishment, and as a consequence have become weak and unable to work. Thus, health reform is brought into disrepute. The work that we have tried to build up solidly is confused with strange things that God has not required, and the energies of the church are crippled. But God will interfere to prevent the results of these too strenuous ideas. The gospel is to harmonize a sinful race. It is to bring the rich and poor together at the feet of Jesus. So the Lord meets us where we are. Wherever you are now, the Lord knows. Because guess what? Even for some of us who believe that we're advanced, if we could see ourselves through the Lord's eyes, we would see that we're nowhere yet. We have much farther to go than we have come. So we may be at different levels, but when we view it against God's yardstick, we're still so very far, yet still he is so tender. So this evening, as we're presenting these things, I want you to not settle down and say, okay, this is what I'm eating. I can't do no better. But I also don't want you to go cold turkey on the other end. I would like for you to start learning and say, okay, how can I do this? How can I make the first step? How can I make the second step after I've made the first? What can I do differently? I'll tell you my journey is a little bit of it. I didn't know food. The only food I know was what the regular Jamaican knew. I'm going to tell you something as simple as lentil. I didn't know there was something called lentil. Like, what is that? Chickpeas. I'm like, what is that? But by making one little step, you start to learn as well. And as you learn, you implement. And before you know it, you're more advanced than you were months before. All right? So this is how we want to take it this evening as we're talking about fats. The time has now come. This was written in 1901. I would tell you that it is not safe to have anything called milk. We did that, was it last week? Anything called milk, all right, that you buy in a supermarket or anything like that is going to make you ill, okay? It's not something that you should, for men who want to stay away from prostate cancer, the ladies who you want to stay away from, milk is one of the best things that you can just look at and exclude it from your diet. All right. And in those days, milk was just milk which was boiled. Today, milk is homogenized and pasteurized, and it's a whole different soup than it was back then. All right. So we want to look at these things in context too. Eggs is created in a very industrialized way. Gone are the days that you had the little chicken outside doing his thing. All right. So those eggs are not safe for you. All right. And the only eggs I'd say that could be safe for persons who have those free range things at home that they make sure are healthy. And if they can ensure that and they need it, meaning that they need that convalescence that eggs can help with, then, you know, it's not to be classed with flesh meat. You may have that if the need is there. But as it is generally, industrially, it's something that's not safe. And we've seen those breakout from time to time, right? All right, so let's talk about Greece. We live in Jamaica, and geez, in Jamaica, people love their gravy. Am I talking the truth? I know I'm talking the truth. All right. Jamaicans love their gravy and love their grease. Let's just read on here. It says, keep grease out of your food. It defiles any preparation of food that you make. So it doesn't matter how healthful you created that food. Once you put grease on it, and let me just explain grease this way. Generally, grease comes from animal fat. Here it is. It is a term for fats, typically from animal sources like lard or some meat drippings that become soft or solid when cooled. It refers to both the fatty byproduct left behind during cooking and the verb to grease the baking pan. All right. I tell you, I never know. My little son is here watching me. I did not know that this was how unhealthy a so-called cake can be until I went into the kitchen and saw years ago some ladies making it. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's the amount of eggs you use. Come on, man. You need to tell me you use a big tin of butter? And you got to be kidding me. I'm like, oh my goodness, that thing is grease. That thing is glue for your blood vessels. Okay. Am I wanting to take all of the niceness out of life? No. But I can tell you something. I work in the healthcare industry. It's not nice. to be sick. The severity and the chronicity of some conditions, if people could turn back their hands of time, they would retrain the palate and learn to bridge the gap between healthful foods that are tasty. All right, put them together. I see a raised hand, but please use the chat. All right, because we want to get through in time. If you use the chat, and if we get through with enough time, I may open up the chat that we can talk a little bit. All right, so just type in the chat in the meantime so that we can bring the comment forward. All right, so if you put the pot in the refrigerator, you allow it to cool and the thing is solid or semi-solid, that's grease. All right. And some persons only stop when the doctor tells them that they have to get off of the grease. All right. They worship it. They love the gravy, but it's not anything good. All right. And the rice has to have a lot of gravy. Some have even seen the practice where they fry the chicken or they fry the article and then throw the water and the ketchup on it and make that is like if you and when you finish eat the mouth is so shining like the sun. All right. And sometimes to be healthy, we have to reject our culture. You see, in heaven, there will only be one culture. You will have Chinese who grew up in China, Africans who possibly grew up doing some things that you in the West Indies wouldn't do, and the Northern Hemisphere you wouldn't do. But they all will give that up for a higher culture, and that is the culture of heaven. So let's not raise our cultures to the level of like it's holy. It ain't holy. There are many things that we do in Jamaican culture which are health destroying. All right. And if sometimes when you say people cuss you out, but if you love someone, you love people, you tell them the truth. All right. And they make the decision for themselves. So grease, something you want to stay away from. Absolutely. Your food doesn't need grease. All right. Not one bit. How about fried versus baked? We do not think fried potatoes are healthful, for there is more or less grease or butter used in preparing them. Hear that? Let's read that again. We do not think fried potatoes are healthful, for there is more or less grease or butter used in preparing them. Good baked or boiled potatoes served with cream and sprinkling of salt are the most healthful. The remnants of Irish and sweet potatoes are prepared with a little cream and salt, rebaked and not fried. They are excellent. And when you read salt here, it's not, what's it called? Sodium chloride. That salt which is robbed of all of the other salts that really make up salts, but true salt, all right? So we should labor to make food appetizing and prepare it in such a way that it will be appetizing as well as nourishing. It should not be robbed of that which the system needs. The writer here says, I use some salt and always have because salt, instead of being deleterious, is actually essential for the blood. Vegetables should be made palatable with a little milk or cream or something equivalent. And then we can go on to some disease associated with animal fat consumption. We want to read here, diseases and health problems associated with excessive consumption of grease and lard. I'm going to go through some of those. But while the body needs small amounts of healthy fats, consuming excessive amounts of grease, lard, butter, and other saturated fats can contribute to numerous health problems, even healthy fats. So if you sit down and you eat 5 pear with bulla, no, bulla is something which is not nourishing. All right? Because bulla is loaded with sugar and the way it is baked is not even good. But bulla is in our culture. What's this guy about? This guy's trying to take away all the niceness out of life. What's he doing? Well, if I care for you, I'm gonna tell you the truth. All right? But you can't temperance. Remember, there are 8 laws, 8 primary laws of health. All right. And one of them is called temperance. Temperance is where you discard things that are bad and you use judiciously in good amounts things that are good. So when Jamaicans sit down and eat 3 East Indian and 12 Julie, these things are bad for you. All right. Because the glycemic index of a mango is very high. All right. That's not anything good. And that's not anything to beat your chest about. You really don't need more than 1, maybe 2 if they're small, and any one sitting and move on. forget eating. All right. But even avocado, which has good and healthy fats, can be taken to an extreme. And then the same result of sickness will occur. So let's talk about some diseases that are associated with the consumption and the free use of these fats. Animal fats, we're talking about grease, lard, butter, the like, heart disease. And heart disease is the #1 killer in all the world. It's a grand term, overarching term for things like #2, stroke. Stroke comes under heart disease. Earlier on, we talked about a stroke, which is where a cerebral artery gets blocked by maybe a clot, but more so often a fatty embolus that has spread from its local area where it was produced and goes into the brain and then can't pass. And so the little vessels that supply that part of the brain die. Sometimes it's an ischemic attack, which means that the body is very resilient and finds a way, sometimes through other circulatory means, to make it happen. The liver has so many what we call accessory circulation, where if one is blocked, it opens up another. But not every organ in the body is so furnished. So the brain is one of those organs that can be hit very easily. All right. And that person suffers a stroke. That may be debilitating for them, or that may be the end of their life. All right. So that's heart disease. So let's consider it. We always hear we dig our graves. People dig their graves with their fork. And it is absolutely true. Hypertension also comes under heart disease. And how does that happen? Fatty deposits within blood vessels, as we talked about earlier on. #1, they also occlude blood vessels and making them stenosed or smaller. And just like your hose, if you cover up that hose, you realize the blood is shooting more, but the very pipe is working harder. You can even see water coming out at the source if your pipe is not that good, because the pressure on the pipe cock where you turn that pipe is harder, right? And so the pressure on your heart gets harder, and that can end up in many bad things: cardiomegaly, heightened blood pressure, stroke at any moment because of hypertension. All right. Obesity, of course. You're eating more than you need, eating animal fat, which is very caloric dense, then your body also stores the excess as fat. All right. And obesity carries with it so many other diseases: type 2 diabetes. Oh gosh, this one here is a killer. All right. And it is being shown that this here is like the master disease that tends to call his friends and say, hey, I got something going on, come and join the party. All right. The type 2 diabetes, we talked a lot about this earlier on, and just refer back to some of the earlier videos. We don't want to stress it here, but type 2 diabetes is really bad. All right. That circulating blood sugar just there is nothing good for the body. All right. Fatty liver, the liver, instead of doing its work, is now hampered by an excess storage of fat. All right. Steatotic liver disease, formerly called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's not caused by alcohol, it's caused by the diet and can be reversed. All right. So also high fructose corn syrup does that to the liver too, just so we know, other than fat. And certain cancers, of course, and the gallbladder disease. I want to tell you something, and I would like for you to look it up as well. You have something called gallstones, all right? Unlike kidney stones are very hard, and they can be broken up by a certain type of ultrasound. But gallstones are very rubbery, and I don't think you'll find this, but what we know is that gallstone disease is because of animal fat consumption. All right. And gallstone disease, that does many bad things to the body. Young people can have it as young as 30 something. They can find that they always have that upset stomach. They feel like throwing up. And often one of the growing elective surgeries that are scheduled in hospitals is actually to remove gallstones. All right. So there you go. It's just the truth. Let's move on now. So this is a progressive work. Let the diet reform be progressive. Let the people be taught how to prepare food without the use of milk or butter. Tell them that the time will soon come when there will be no safety in using eggs, milk, cream, or butter because disease in animals is increasing in proportion to the increase of wickedness among men. All right, the Bible tells us that the whole earth is defiled because of the inhabitants thereof. The time is near when, because of the iniquity of the fallen race, the whole animal creation will groan under the disease that curse our earth. So the animals themselves are taken with disease, and human beings make of them their staple of food. That is setting up a perfect storm. All right. So it's a progressive work. We want the people to learn how to do these things. And we want to graduate this from just being on the internet to where we will be in your locality, teaching on different subjects. Last week, we had Elder Stoddard who taught about bread and fruits and grains. We would like to have like him and his team teach you how to make good bread which is free from all of the things that are in the industrialized bread preparation. So we want to teach these things and just pray that we'll get there where we can host these things and people can come out and learn physically how they can do these things as well. All right. We want to teach how to prepare to make food palatable without milk or butter. I think it's 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had on Roxanne Genus who dealt with healthful cookery. And I've had the privilege to eat from her as well. My own wife prepares amazing food. And sometimes I have to say, do you mean to tell me that you didn't use this? I didn't. Just yesterday we had jackfruit ice cream made from scratch without any milk. And it was amazing. All right. She made it on Friday. It was great. So we just have to apply ourselves and learn how we can do these things and share the knowledge. All right. So we're going to move step by step to a better and a greater ideal. Olives and olive oil. Let's talk about olive oil for a little bit before we close out this evening. It says here, olives may be so prepared as to be eaten with good results at every meal. The advantages sought by the use of the butter may be obtained by the eating of properly prepared olives. The oil in the olives relieves constipation, and for consumptives and for those who have inflamed, irritated stomachs, it is better than any drug. As a food, it is better than any oil coming secondhand from animals. All right, so there we go. And olive oils, let's go on again. When prepared, olive, like nuts, supply the place of butter and flesh meats. The oil as eaten in the olive is far preferable to animal oil or fat. It serves as a laxative. Its use will be found beneficial to consumptives, and it is healing to an inflamed, irritated stomach. All right. It would be a disservice this evening if I close and didn't talk about seed oils. All right. There's been an explosion of different oils on the market that come from seed. You will see in the average oil that you buy in the supermarket, or you could buy in the supermarket, called vegetable oil. You're wondering why is it? It's not really vegetable, it's just a seed oil. All right. But they call it vegetable because it didn't come from an animal. All right. But it came from a seed. And they've found a way to get that oil out of the seed. Remember earlier on we talked about that plants store their energy in their seed. All right. And that's why we have nuts and some grains, which are seeds, having oil in them. All right. But seed oils are very bad for you because when they are heated in the body, they are very inflaming. All right. They're very inflammatory in the body. And they fight your blood vessels. Remember, we talked about the blood vessels coming under inflammation, therefore stressing the tunica intima and allowing fat to escape into that blood vessel and grow, and then come out one day and just give a stroke. Yes, we talked about that. One of the sources of that inflammation is actually seed oils. All right. So someone might say, oh, but it's more expensive. It's 2,000 plus for a bottle of olive oil. I tell you, come on, man. You spend money on other things. You do it all the time. You take out that money and you spend stuff, you buy it. It's just that we haven't gotten used to that I should spend that much on an oil, for example. All right. Put the best in because you'll find that after a while you soak it up and you found out how to live with it. And once you adopted a new culture in your home, you just can't go back. All right. So there are certain olive oils which are finishers, like the extra virgin. You don't need to heat that. You can put that over your vegetable and so on and mix that in and have it as it is. All right. But there are some olive oils that are cooking grade that you can get, and those can be heated and safely had. All right. Coconut oil as well is great for cooking. All right. So watch out for those seed oils. They look great. They're cheaper. But you should know that anything too cheap is never good for the body, okay? And it's not, I know that when we were growing up in the village in Jamaica, they call every oil coconut oil, but it is not coconut oil. It is actually vegetable oil, all right? And you can make your own coconut oil if you, oh, my phone died, if you're that interested to do so. So I just wanted to talk about that, even though I do not have a slide here for that. So the free use of butter obstructs digestion. So this was written to a certain person who took out all butter, all right? And at the same time, they couldn't find a way to make their food appetizing anymore. So here this wonderful counsel that was given to them. Butter should not be placed on the table, for if it is, some will use it too freely. You know, like when you see it, you just always pause, you butter this and you butter that, and it will obstruct digestion. Oh yes, have you ever heard that? Butter obstructs digestion? Hang on, coming soon. Science will soon be highlighting this, but we don't need to wait on science. The Bible says, through thy testimonies, thou hast made me wiser than even my teachers. While science has to wait for something to be double-blind, placebo-controlled, tested, the Bible already tells you. And so you can be wise, all right? The health that we're teaching on this program is not only evidence-based, but is more so faith-based, all right? But for yourself, she said to this person, you should occasionally use a little butter on cold bread. Because when butter is heated, it changes the constituents once again. If this will make the food more appetizing to you, this would do you far less harm than to confine yourself to preparations of food that are not palatable. And you know, when something doesn't taste good, people generally tend not to eat it. All right? All right. So God meets us where we are, but takes us further than we imagine. As we close out this evening, I'm going to look at the chats if there's anything there. Milk, eggs, and butter should not be classed with flesh meats. We know it's not the same. In some cases, the use of eggs can be beneficial. And the time has not yet come in 1902. I think the time is here now. But we want to meet people where they're at. So if you're on this program and this constitutes a staple of your meals, we can meet you where you're at. God meets you where you're at, and he takes you further than you can imagine. There are some poor families whose diet consists largely of bread and milk, for example. They have little fruit and can't afford to purchase the nut foods. In Jamaica, if you live in the country, you have much fruit, right? In teaching health reform, as in all of the gospel work, we are to meet the people where they are. Hasn't God met you where you were? Until we can teach them how to prepare health reform foods that are palatable, nourishing, and yet inexpensive, we are not at liberty to present the most advanced propositions regarding health reform diet. I believe what we presented here this evening is not the most advanced. For those who know this message inside out, we can even take it further. But we've presented here animal fat. Animal is not something that the human being is to be eating any at all. All right? Linked with inflammation, it is the perfect, it's laying the perfect groundwork for cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 killer in all the world. Higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's ideal for his children. And that's what I want to close on this evening. Next week, we'll be turning it up another notch as we go into proteins. Very important for us to be at that one as we look at proteins. What is protein? Often people say to me, for example, where do you get your protein? And it's an interesting question because we can also ask, where does the animal get his protein? But we'll find that it's not really protein that the human being needs to consume. What the human being needs to consume is amino acids. All right, let me see here.